I'm not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for Life in UK test part 414, composers, that's on page 171. Why you're doing leg stretching and if you participate in the leg stretching, let's set your own risk. So the first exercise, we're having the legs in front, the toes together, we are putting the toes to us, and we're going in front and you can stretch it. So before we going on with the composers, we're first going to talk, we were not done with the last person here named by foreign leaders, and that's now about the Second World War, what we're talking about. So the last person here named was Adolf Hitler, and now I talked quite a bit already, and now what it was in the book when in 1940, Germany marched through France quite quickly, and then the 300,000 British and French troops for Britain had come to France to fight. They were in Dunkirk. They were trapped, and they were for quite some time, but then from Britain out, leisure boats and other boats came to rescue them, and they rescued 300,000 people there. And that whole gave them motivation, known as the Spirit of Dunkirk. And then the Battle of Britain happened, and where did the Royal Air Force fought against the Germans in the air with pilots. And the British Royal Air Force, they had the Spitfires and the Hurricane as the airplanes, and the Germans had the Stukas, and they were fighting, and Britain won that battle. For example, maybe because in 1935 the radar was first tested, and Britain had the radar. I don't really want to talk very much about that now, but I don't know if it's unsensible to say that, but Britain had the home advantage. The Germans, they had to come with the trains, and the battle was fought over Britain. Home advantage is maybe not a good term because the civilians of Britain suffered under it, but the battle was mostly done. It was also over the Channel fought a lot, but they were starting in France. And we're going to the next exercise, because we're now talking a bit broader about the Second World War. And also with the radar. So if the Royal Air pilots never flew over France, they even later bombarded also then there, but if the battle was fought over Britain, it was mostly over Britain or in the Channel, then they basically had the advantage of ground support. But we maybe should talk better about that when we're talking about the Battle of Britain in another part, maybe. So and then Britain won the Battle of Britain, and Winston Churchill said about that, never in the story of humanity did so many people had so few to thank so much. Paraphrase, I don't know the exact words right now. And because the Royal Air Force were around 200 pilots, I heard once. Only 200 people basically fought in the Spitfires and Hurricanes against the Germans. The bombardment then continued. The Germans were continuing the aggression against Britain. And that was then known as the Blitz. I don't understand why it is known as the Blitz. But it is known as the Blitz, and the Germany was bombarding a lot. They named here the Coventry and the east end of London, for example, were heavily bombarded. We have changed black. And Britain then for 1 year, from June 1940 until June 1941, was basically the alone big country fighting against Germany. But I think Australia and Canada did always supported it, and also from India, many people supported Britain, with many people, and many also died. And we're going to the next exercise for 1990s. No, the kart racer. We're having 1990 with the legs. We're going with the hands to the knee behind us and the knee in front. And then on the 7th of December 1941, did Japan attack Pearl Harbor, but previously did Germany invade the Soviet Union. And now the Soviet Union was also fighting against Germany, and Germany had heavy losses in... Where was it? It was later. It was the whole time during which Germany attacked the Soviet Union did the German troops have heavy losses. So then Britain was not alone anymore, because the Soviet Union was also attacking Germany. The Soviet Union and Germany had made, previously to the Second World War, a contract that they're not going to attack each other. And that is why we could also then together attack Poland. and they had said that we're not going to attack each other, but Germany was not breaking the contract and attacking the Soviet Union. Now the Soviet Union was against Germany in the Second World War. And then did Japan 41, at the end of 41, attack Pearl Harbor, and now the United States did no longer be isolated and could be step aside and not be part of the Second World War, but they were now in the Second World War. I don't know the numbers, but I think over 2,000 people or so died in the attack on Pearl Harbor. And we are with the legs with the knee behind us. No, yeah, and with the hands at the knee, which is behind us, and we're going with the shoulder, the knee in front of us on the other side now. Now the United States also went the war. And Germany had heavy losses in the Soviet Union. And they never could really establish full control also in and it was Sweden. I confuse always Sweden and Norway. In Sweden there was always resistance fighters. And I think Italy also had some losses. And the Allied forces, then led by Britain and the United States of America, and also important name the Soviet Union, got stronger than Germany, and Germany had heavy losses, and they then landed in the Normandy on the D-Day. I forgot the date. And on the D-Day in the Normandy, and they started to liberate France over a couple of months, and then the Benelux countries. And they landed also in Sicily and started to fight through Italy. And we're going to the next exercise, 1990 with the legs and the knee just in front. And then we're starting to go through Italy and also through France. And there was also resistance from the other side of the Soviet Union was also coming. And until mid-45, they fought through whole Europe and liberated all the countries occupied by Nazi Germany, and then also fought and won completely in Germany. And Adolf Hitler is the named person here, so we're talking basically about Adolf Hitler and what we have here. We're going on with it. We're going on with that subject first, with that line of a story. And when Adolf Hitler was in Berlin, and he didn't flew, he stayed in Berlin. And the Soviet Union basically, there was a big battle of Berlin with many, many civilian deaths also. And when Hitler personally gave up, and then a week later, on the 8th of May 45, it was when declared the complete defeat of all German troops, which were basically completely defeated. The Battle of Berlin was lost, and almost all Germany, just in the central part of Germany, there were a few pieces and a bit in the Alps where still German troops were, but it was 99% or so defeated or more. And then on the 8th of May 45, the German completely surrender. And we're going into the pigeon stretch. And Adolf Hitler died also. So because we're talking about Adolf Hitler, he died. I'm not completely sure. I think it was the 31st April. I think it was shortly after midnight, so it was the 31st April. And now that was the Second World War, basically, when the Second World War in Europe ended, with the surrendering of Nazi Germany on the 8th of May 1945. And in Japan, the Pacific War got a little longer on. The American troops were also liberating more and more areas, and also, I'm pretty sure Australia was part of it, because there were also big attacks on Australia. There was the attack on Darwin, basically the same as on Pearl Harbor. They came and attacked it out of nothing also, without any declaration of war, just out of nothing. And I think also China was stronger. Japan had also attacked China. I want to bring the story completely to the end of the Second World War, so we're talking about that. And then the Americans had built the atom bomb in the Manhattan Project, and splitting the atom, that was done led by a team by Ernest Rutherford and Manchester and London University. And then in the Manhattan Project, they had built the atom bomb, and they dropped one then on Hiroshima and a week later on Nagasaki. And now it was clear to the Japanese army that they had no chance against another country with an atom bomb. And they then surrendered. The military was then ready to surrender, which was then formally done by the emperor, but that's not another story. So, and then Japan surrendered, and then also the Pacific War ended in August 45. And at the Second World War completely. Now that is the story of Adolf Hitler. Basically, what is the background basically to what is written here in the book. Now we're coming to the composers. Now we're having here Henry Purcell. Henry Purcell, he was an organist at Westminster Abbey, which is I think it is in London. I never said that, but it must be in London. I've seen it in some movies, so it must be in London. Yes, it is in London. If the movies are correct. So Westminster Abbey was an organist. He wrote church music, but also operas. And he was and is influential. And then longer with pigeon pause. Then there was George Frederick Handel. He was German-born, but he became a British citizen. And what did he compose? He composed, for example, the Messiah, which is often sung at Easter in oratorio. And he wrote water music for George I. And for George II, he wrote music for the royal fireworks. We're going to the other side. First to the pigeon pause. No. First to the 1990s stretch, and just gonna show. So, and then there were the composers. There is Gustav Holst. And Gustav Holst, he wrote the planets. Gustav Holst wrote the planets. About these 8 planets, which are they? Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto. Saturn first, then Jupiter. Uranus, Neptune. Maybe we should write it once down and really learn it with a new sentence which works in English. So, and the music which he had used for Jupiter, did he use also for when the hymn I Vow to Be My Country, the name of that. And then there was Sir Edward Elgar, and he wrote Pomp and Circumstance marches. And I think it is the first one of his marches, known as Land of Hope and Glory. It's famous, and sung oftentimes at the last night of the proms, which is done in the Royal Albert Hall in London. And the last night of the proms, they are lasting for 8 weeks. I'm not going to tell you how, so promenade comes from the music promenade. We're going around, we're promenading. And we're going into the pigeon pause. And the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, they are doing that. The last night of the proms, and the BBC made the first radio in 1922, and 40 years later, television in 1936. First television series. The first television was 10 years after the radio, 1932. And now that is done in the Royal Albert Hall, and there was already something. I wanted something to the Royal Albert Hall. This Royal Albert Hall has a big glass and metal roof. And the metal used for it is a specific type of metal. And that has a specific amount of carbon in it, because we were once talking about the Bessemer process. And the Bessemer process is removing by blowing oxygen through the heated iron, the carbon out of it, and then giving so much carbon to it as we want in it. And now this metal used for Royal Albert Hall in the roof is a specific type of metal with a specific amount of carbon. And the Royal Albert Hall is named after the husband of Victoria, Queen Victoria, because he had died a few years earlier. And now, and there in this Royal Albert Hall, there's the last night of the proms, and there is oftentimes the Land of Hope and Glory by Sir Edward Elgar played. Now we're having Ralph Vaughan Williams, and there was nothing written in part of it, he's a composer. And then we're having Sir William Walton. He was the one with Belshazzar and Shinazar. So, but he wrote the marches for the coronation of George VI and Queen Elizabeth II. And then there's Benjamin Britten. He founded the Oldenburg Festival in Suffolk for music, and he wrote A Young Person's Introduction to Music, or what it was. And he made, it was a double B, not Grimsby, it was not Billy Bob, it was Billy Budd. And I don't know the other one yet. Now we're going into the pigeon pose. We're having the soles of the feet together. We're sitting tall up and leaning in front. You can hold this pigeon pose, no, the butterfly stretch for a minute if you want to. Otherwise, I don't have time left. I thank you very much and